Vast expanse of the alien world stretched endlessly, jagged mountains etched against a purple sky, rivers of glowing liquid winding through valleys that seemed alive with motion. Hovering crafts, sleek and glinting with metallic precision, patrolled the atmosphere like predatory birds, their sensors scanning for anomalies. Within the heart of the civilization, a towering citadel stood, built from materials that defied human comprehension, a monument to an empire that had conquered countless systems. At the apex of this fortress, the alien general observed the operations with disciplined intensity, his multiple eyes scanning the holographic projections before him, each one displaying the movement of other species across nearby star systems. He was meticulous, proud, and utterly convinced of his superiority. Nothing had ever challenged the might of his fleet, nor the strategic genius he had cultivated over decades of conquest. Reports arrived at his command station of a minor incident on a distant blue planet in a relatively insignificant system. Humans, they claimed, were primitive, unpredictable, yet remarkably resilient. Children had been spotted engaging in what the scouts described as coordinated activities, an unusual phenomenon for being so young. The general, confident in the invincibility of his forces, issued an order to retrieve these children for study, anticipating a routine capture, a trivial addition to his growing collection of subjugated species. He expected fear, confusion, compliance, perhaps curiosity, but certainly nothing more. The operation was swift. Crafts descended through the atmosphere, unseen, unchallenged. The children, who had been playing near a small settlement, sensed nothing until the world changed abruptly around them. A humming, piercing in its intensity, filled the air. Shadows swallowed the fields and houses, and in the blink of an eye, they were lifted from their homes, their surroundings replaced with cold, metallic walls and unfamiliar technology. Panic surged through the general soldiers as well, though they masked behind their disciplined facades. The children's reactions, however, were immediate and unexpected. They did not scream in prolonged terror. Instead, their eyes widened with curiosity, their minds racing, instinct and ingenuity kicking in without hesitation. Within the transport vessels, the children began observing the mechanics of their confinement. The alien containment units were advanced, designed to suppress any attempt at resistance, yet subtle vulnerabilities existed. One child, barely 8, pressed a small device in a certain sequence, and a locking mechanism flickered, though it did not open. Another discovered that the force field shifted slightly when two individuals move in harmony, creating microgaps. Each minor discovery was cataloged silently in their minds. They whispered, communicated through gestures, and shared glances, a language unspoken yet understood perfectly between them. The general, observing from his command station, initially dismissed the reports of unusual behavior as exaggeration. He had commanded entire planetary subjugations. Children were inconsequential, yet the frequency of anomalies began to accumulate. Sensors reported slight disruptions in the containment fields, minor yet persistent. The children had not yet escaped, but the effects of their interactions with the alien systems were unmistakable. Confusion began to gnaw at the edges of the general's composure, though he maintained his rigid demeanor, attributing the irregularities to technical glitches or the inexperience of his subordinates. Communication with the field units revealed more. The soldiers responsible for monitoring the children reported rapid adaptation, quick observation, and even mimicry of alien procedures. One child had dismantled a minor surveillance device using only their bare hands. Another had manipulated a control interface to send false readings to the monitoring systems. Each report deepened the general's unease, though he refused to show it, insisting that humans, especially children, were still fundamentally fragile and predictable. Yet the repetition of these incidents painted a different picture, one that challenged centuries of assured superiority. By the third cycle of observation, the general could no longer ignore the pattern. Humans, even at a tender age, displayed capabilities far beyond what his analysts had projected. They did not operate according to fear or simple instinct alone. Their strategies, though small-scale, were deliberate, precise, and effective. The children exploited weaknesses in alien logic, anticipated actions, and coordinated without the need for direct communication. It was unsettling, a realization that stirred a sensation the general had long thought impossible: doubt. Within the transport vessel, the children continued to experiment subtly. A child who had been quiet, observing more than acting, now initiated a small chain of actions designed to test response times of the alien systems. Doors would open, sensors would reset, alarms would trigger, yet no punitive action followed. Each misstep by the aliens was observed, internalized, and used to further refine their approach. The general's reports grew increasingly erratic. His once precise communications now carried hints of tension. He began to question the competence of his own troops, wondering how a species so small, so underestimated, could manipulate his advanced technology with such ease. The children's ingenuity extended beyond the mechanical. They learned the rhythm of alien patrols, memorized shift patterns, and predicted moments of vulnerability. They were, in every sense, thinking beyond survival. They were strategizing. This subtle but relentless display of intelligence created a ripple of panic that began at the edges of the general's mind. He had confronted armies, led sieges, and commanded fleets that destroyed civilizations, yet here, confronted by beings barely capable of speaking their language, he felt a rare and unwelcome uncertainty. Each time the children managed a minor success, disabling a sensor for a fraction of a second, diverting an alert, moving undetected, the general felt it more acutely. His mind raced with contingency plans, protocols for escalation, and strategies for absolute control. Yet with every plan, every calculated response, the humans adapted faster, anticipating even the most conservative measures. This relentless, adaptive intelligence unsettled him more than any battlefield encounter. The alien code of warfare did not account for improvisational brilliance at this scale, at this age. Reports continued to stream in, noting subtle disruptions, small sabotage, and unexplained behavioral patterns. Soldiers found themselves unable to predict the humans' next move. Every assumption the general had relied upon since youth was being challenged. In the alien military doctrine, such anomalies were rare and often met with immediate correction. Yet here, anomalies were systematic, deliberate, and growing in sophistication. Panic began to percolate beneath the general's armor of confidence. He did not scream, he did not act rashly, but a cold awareness settled in. These humans were different, far more dangerous, far more capable than anyone had imagined. In private moments, the general reflected, analyzing, recalculating. Every known parameter regarding human capabilities had been invalidated. The children quickly adapted to their surroundings, analyzing every mechanism, every protocol, every behavior of their captors with sharp precision. They moved in silence, observing patterns and rhythms with an intensity far beyond their apparent age. Their minds worked in concert, anticipating outcomes, calculating possibilities, and testing limits. Nothing was left to chance. Each action, each minor manipulation became part of a larger strategy that unfolded subtly yet decisively. The aliens, conditioned to control and predict, began to experience unexpected disruptions. Systems that had been considered flawless flickered under human interference. Doors opened briefly without command. Surveillance feeds misreported. Alarms reset without reason. The general received reports of these irregularities, each one unsettling, yet he persisted in dismissing them as trivial anomalies. As the children continued to explore, they discovered small inconsistencies in the alien infrastructure. Some pathways were automated with timing loops that could be exploited. Some locks and barriers required sequences that, once observed, could be bypassed. Each child specialized instinctively. One memorized patterns, another manipulated mechanisms, another observed alien behavior to predict reaction times. The synergy between them was extraordinary, a silent coordination born from shared understanding and intuition. Their success was subtle. The aliens detected only minor deviations at first, but the pattern was undeniable. The general, receiving repeated notifications of system failures and unexpected events, felt an unfamiliar unease. His carefully structured order was being challenged not by a rival fleet or a coordinated military assault, but by being so small and underestimated that their presence had initially seemed inconsequential. Every report contradicted centuries of doctrine. Human children, weak in body, proved formidable in intellect. He reviewed each data point meticulously, analyzing how such insignificant beings could create disruptions without direct confrontation. His mind, trained for logic, precision, and conquest, struggled to reconcile the scale of their capability with their apparent physical vulnerability. The children tested limits with precision. When alien monitors swept the area, they froze, blending with shadows, coordinating movements to avoid detection. When sensors scanned for interference, they exploited timing lapses to create false signals. When automated systems attempted containment, subtle manipulations caused minor malfunctions. Each action was small but cumulative, creating a ripple effect that the general could not ignore. Alien officers insisted on stricter controls, more aggressive measures. Yet each intervention failed in ways that suggested deliberate intelligence on the part of humans. The general's panic, while controlled, grew steadily. He observed patterns that no algorithm had predicted, outcomes that no contingency plan had anticipated. Reports of minor escapes, system manipulations, and coordinated movements painted a picture that challenged every assumption about human weakness. He reviewed the humans' every interaction with equipment, every reaction to stimuli, and began to realize that conventional measures of control were ineffective. The children did not merely react. They adapted, learned, and improved with each test, each misstep of the aliens, each unexpected opportunity. Humans communicated silently through gestures, glances, and subtle signals, coordinating without electronic aids. They anticipated patrol shifts, predicted response sequences, and subtly altered the environment to their advantage. They did not need to overpower. They needed only to exploit gaps, and the results were increasingly visible. Doors failed to lock as intended, alerts misfired, pathways became temporarily accessible, and alien soldiers found themselves reacting to unpredictable behavior. The general's orders, designed for compliance and control, began to produce counterintuitive outcomes. Each failure reinforced the realization that these humans were extraordinary. Every day brought new demonstrations of ingenuity. The children learned the operation of minor systems, discovered how to override security protocols, and subtly sabotaged automated surveillance. They were careful, leaving no overt evidence of their interference. Yet the accumulations of anomalies were impossible to ignore. Alien soldiers reported with increasing alarm that the humans seemed to anticipate every measure taken to contain them. Each report added weight to the growing tension in the general's mind, a tension born not of fear for himself, but fear for control he had always maintained effortlessly. The children's influence extended beyond mechanics. They observed alien behavior, noting the patterns, habits, and decision-making tendencies of their captors. They identified predictable sequences in patrols, reaction times to alerts, and procedural redundancies. By subtly influencing these patterns, they created opportunities for small victories. A diverted alarm here, an unmonitored path there, a minor disruption in communications. Each success was carefully calibrated, cumulative, and invisible in its direct cause, yet the effect was unmistakable. The general sensed a growing pattern, a subtle yet undeniable evidence of intelligence operating far beyond expectation. The general convened councils with his advisors, attempting to analyze the anomalies logically. Each explanation faltered. Every attempt to categorize human behavior within known frameworks failed. The children's actions did not fit the expected patterns of fear, compliance, or instinct. They operated on creativity, strategic thought, and foresight, and their unpredictability increased with every intervention. The general's confidence, once absolute, wavered. He recognized a dangerous combination of intelligence, observation, and adaptability in being so small and underestimated. Meanwhile, the children's success inspired confidence among themselves. Each subtle triumph reinforced a belief that they could manipulate their environment safely. The general soldiers, trained to enforce control through intimidation and force, found themselves unsure, hesitant, and increasingly ineffective. The children exploited this uncertainty with precision, coordinating minor diversions, navigating obstacles, and bypassing protocols without detection. They did not attack directly. They manipulated, observed, and improvised. Every calculated move compounded the general's unease. The children's coordination reached new levels of sophistication. They observed not only the systems and procedures, but also the psychological tendencies of the alien personnel. They predicted decisions, anticipated reactions, and subtly influenced outcomes without alerting their captors. The general noticed a pattern emerging. These beings, though small and physically weak, operated with strategic foresight and ingenuity that rivaled the most advanced tactical simulations of a civilization. He felt the first pangs of panic. Humans were not only unpredictable but effective beyond all expectation. With each passing cycle, the children's adaptations grew bolder. Minor escapes became more precise, small system disruptions became increasingly effective, and coordination among them seemed almost instinctive. The children had moved beyond survival. What began as scattered disruptions had become coordinated strategy, each action reinforcing the next, each observation feeding into a larger plan. They now understood how the alien system spoke to one another, how the protocols were layered, and where the cracks lay hidden beneath the surface. Every flicker, every malfunction, every delay was no longer coincidence, but deliberate interference orchestrated by small minds operating with precision. The aliens could not comprehend how such young beings possessed the clarity to dismantle a system that entire civilizations feared. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The general sat within his command chamber, receiving a flood of reports that refused to align with his expectations. Units reported loss of communication, automated defenses misfired, energy conduits rerouted unexpectedly, surveillance systems delivered false images. The failures were not random. They occurred in chains, cascading one into another until entire sections of his control collapsed briefly before rebooting. Soldiers scrambled to restore order, but each effort was intercepted by yet another disruption. The general clenched his claws, the alien equivalent of frustration echoing through his movements, because for the first time in his career, he was no longer in command. Something else had taken control. Children he had once dismissed as trivial prey. The humans no longer hesitated. They advanced through the alien fortress with silent confidence, manipulating access points, disabling barriers, redirecting patrols with precise timing. Their unity was absolute, each one contributing a piece of the strategy without argument or confusion. Their movements were instinctive, as if bound by an unspoken understanding. They created paths where none existed, turned enemy systems against themselves, and forced the aliens into a state of reactive chaos. Panic spread among the ranks, discipline breaking under the strain of an enemy that fought not with weapons, but with intelligence. The general's mind raced with possibilities, recalculating every model he had relied upon for decades. The predictions of his simulations no longer held. Humans defied the algorithms. He saw patterns where there should have been randomness, intentionality where there should have been instinct. They were unpredictable in ways his rigid civilization could not match. His strategies, perfected through centuries of doctrine, were useless against ingenuity that rewrote the rules as the game was played. The thought gnawed at him. If mere children could create this level of disruption, what would adults of the species be capable of? The realization unsettled him more than any fleet or weapon ever had. The children pressed further, dismantling control over critical systems. Engines faltered under recalibrated commands, navigation destabilized by subtle inputs, security locks disengaged without warning. Aliens rushed to respond, but every move seemed predicted in advance. Each countermeasure triggered another failure, as though the humans had seen the sequence unfolding before it began. Soldiers grew restless, their discipline shattering under the weight of uncertainty. Whispers spread of humans being untouchable, their minds operating beyond comprehension. Fear, once a tool of control, now consumed those who wielded it. The general finally gave the order for lethal containment, a measure he had hoped to avoid. Soldiers prepared their weapons, corridors sealed with reinforced barriers, and automated turrets activated with deadly precision. Yet the humans had already anticipated such escalation. By the time weapons locked onto them, targeting systems failed, turrets rotated away, and power conduits surged uncontrollably before shutting down entirely. The children moved unharmed, their plan unfolding step by step, unraveling the defenses of an empire built on certainty. What the general had considered unassailable was collapsing around him, undone by beings who barely understood the scope of what they were achieving but instinctively knew how to exploit weakness. As systems crumbled, the children reached the central controls, not by force but by intellect. They had mapped every connection, tested every sequence, and learned to manipulate the heart of the alien stronghold. With a few coordinated actions, they created a cascade that disabled entire layers of defense simultaneously. Doors opened, energy fields collapsed, communication networks fell silent. The fortress that had stood as a symbol of dominance now lay vulnerable, its power diminished by the brilliance of human minds too young to be burdened by fear or limitation. The general stood frozen as alarm shrieked across his command chamber. His officers pleaded for orders, but none came. He had no orders to give. Every protocol he issued was countered, every command irrelevant, every plan obsolete. His mind, once the most disciplined among his species, fractured under the realization that he was no longer the hunter, but the prey. The humans had turned his empire's strength into weakness, its systems into traps, its certainty into chaos. Panic fully consumed him, not the outward frenzy of fear, but the internal collapse of certainty that left him hollow. The children, though small, carried themselves with quiet determination. They did not revel in their triumph, did not boast or taunt. They simply executed the plan they had built, step by step, until freedom was within reach. Their victory was not born of arrogance but of necessity, an instinctive drive to survive and adapt. This lack of malice unsettled the general even more, for it revealed that their power did not come from hatred or domination, but from intelligence and resilience. They were not conquerors, yet they had conquered him all the same. The fortress continued to spiral into dysfunction. Automated systems failed to reboot. Communication signals collapsed into silence. Navigation controls spun aimlessly, and power grids fluctuated wildly. Soldiers abandoned their posts, unable to comprehend how children had undone what fleets could not challenge. Fear spread like a contagion, eroding discipline, leaving chaos in its place. The general, once a symbol of authority, now stood as a figure of despair, his composure shattered, his strategies reduced to irrelevance. He watched helplessly as the children completed their final steps, ensuring not only their escape, but the humiliation of an empire that had underestimated them. When the humans activated their last sequence, the fortress entered control shut down, systems folding inward until the once invincible citadel lay dormant, a hollow shell of silent machinery. The general's vision blurred with disbelief. His empire's pride, undone not by armies or weapons, but by ingenuity he had dismissed as impossible. The children stood at the threshold of freedom, small figures against the vast machinery, yet more powerful than the legions that had tried to control them. As they departed, leaving chaos behind, the general sank into silence. His mind replayed every decision, every assumption, every moment where he had underestimated them. He realized that the true power of humanity was not strength, not technology, not numbers, but the capacity to see beyond constraints, to adapt faster than any system, to improvise where logic failed. These children had revealed a truth that would haunt him. Humans were dangerous not despite their weakness, but because of it. In the aftermath, whispers spread to the alien ranks.